The following is a paid presentation brought to you by Amazing Facts Incorporated. Coming up next on Amazing Facts Presents,
Daniel could serve them well because he served a higher monarch first.
For over 40 years, Amazing Facts has been dedicated to sharing God's Word through media. This program features highlights from some of our best television broadcasts. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Amazing Facts Presents. Today's presentation is an excerpt from the Everlasting Gospel video series.
And so we're going to talk about a story this morning that is very familiar, maybe take a fresh look at a story that has been referred to, especially for the children. And it's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Very quickly, to give you the history, Daniel, when he was a young man, had been carried off captive to Babylon during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. Through a series of miracles, he was exalted from the position of being a captive to being prime minister and chief counselor for Nebuchadnezzar. Now, go with me to the book of Daniel, chapter 6. We're going to read verse 1 with that background. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes or governors to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was chief or first, that the princes might give account to them, and so the king would have no loss. Part of delegating such a big kingdom, because not only was it the Babylonian Empire, but now the Babylonians had been absorbed by the Persians, so you've got this very big kingdom to administrate. And so he puts Daniel in among the 3 governors because he can be trusted. Well, you know, the other Medo-Persians sort of resent that. Here you take this captive from Judah who had been, he's not even a national, and not only you give him a position of honor, but the king was thinking about setting him over the whole realm. Verse 3. Then this Daniel, while he was working as one of the 3 top governors, distinguished himself above the governors and the princes because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. He just exuded the Holy Spirit. There was the aura of God's Spirit about him that others recognized. Why did he thrive during the reign of all those monarchs? Because Daniel really never served them first. Daniel could serve them well because he served a higher monarch first. And they recognized that about him. And he thought to set him over the whole realm. He was going to make him prime minister or viceroy of the entire empire. Now that really bothered the other politicians who thought they should be in line. There was envy. They were jealous. Now, before I go very far in the study of Daniel chapter 6, I want you to know the whole great controversy is in this story between Christ and Satan. The battle between good and evil. The life of Christ is even modeled in the life of Daniel. Jesus, second only to God Almighty the Father, the idea that Daniel would be second only to the king, they could not stand that. What was it that caused the rebellion of Lucifer? He was jealous. He envied the position of Christ. He wanted to be like the Most High. So a plot was put into effect to get him out of the way. They sought to find some occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful. What did they say about Jesus? Even Pilate said, I find no fault in him. They sent spies who came back and said, no man speaks like this man. He was faithful. By the way, Daniel was human. You can have the same spirit Daniel had. So stop making excuses. This story is in the Bible to encourage you that you can live a godly life and have integrity. They said, verse 5, we're not going to find any charge against this Daniel. They can't even say Daniel, this Daniel, unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. We're going to need to probably get some religious law enacted and use that against him. Somewhere where his law and principles conflict with the law of the Medo-Persians. So the governors and the princes thronged before the king, and they said, King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom and the administrators and the princes have consulted together and the advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute. Well, they're lying. It wasn't all of them. Daniel was chief. He wasn't in there. I can promise you that. They're trying to give the king the impression that they had had consensus and everybody agreed this was a good thing to unite the kingdom. We're consulting that the king establish a royal statute and make a firm decree that whoever petitions or prays to any god or man for 30 days, except for you, O king, he'll be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. I underlined in my Bible, cannot be changed, does not alter. And then it goes on to say, therefore King Darius signed the written decree. Now, the Medo-Persians, when they made a law, it wasn't like in North America where we vote a law and we vote it out. We say, here's a good law. No, we're changing that law. We're repealing that law. We're modifying that law. Depends on who's in office at the time and whether or not we liked it. When they made a law back then, the law of the king did not change. And it wasn't just his vanity. Nobody prays to anybody but me for 30 days. Darius wasn't, and probably appealed to his vanity. But you see, they knew something back then that leaders know. When you cannot unite diverse people because of politics or because of language barriers, because there are cultural differences or geography, if you can get people united in religion, they can overcome all the other barriers. The devil knows that. Nebuchadnezzar knew that. Why do you think he said, I'm going to have everybody gather on the plain of Dura. We're going to make a statue. We're all going to bow to the same statue at the same time. Unite the kingdom. We'll be welded together by common faith and worship. Bring the people together. So Darius signs the decree. Good idea. I got 127 provinces. The people are scattered. We got some Babylonians, some Medes, some Persians, some Jews, and all these different. Weld them together. You all pray to the king for 30 days. And develop morale and support. So he signed the decree. But he didn't know that it was really a ruse. The whole thing was to get rid of Daniel. Now, here's where, for me, the story is phenomenal. Daniel is a man of sterling conviction and courage. You read in verse 10, I've got this underlined in my Bible. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, I doubt with his high position that they could get the document printed, copied, and circulated without his knowing. Somebody brought him a copy before it went out. When Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. He withdrew from the corruption of the palace back to his house. And in his upper room, his windows being open. Now, why would that be mentioned? What does the law say? Anybody caught praying for 30 days. You know, doesn't Jesus say when you pray, enter into your closet and shut the door? Wouldn't this have been a good time to go in the closet and shut the door? Why did he pray? Not only did he pray with his windows open, he prayed on his knees so they could see physically he was in a posture of prayer. He could have just sat there in the window with his arms folded and looked like he was meditating, but he got down and took on the posture of prayer. And he did not pray towards the palace in Babylon or in Shushan. He prayed towards Jerusalem. Everything about what Daniel did said, I am not going to worship man. I am going to worship God because it's better to obey God than man, right? Another reason he left his window open, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works, not to glorify you, glorify your Father in heaven. Don't hide what you believe. Daniel was ready to be caught praying at the cost of his life. And there were probably spies set up watching to see, is he going to continue his custom? Is he going to close his windows? Is he going to hide the posture of prayer? Daniel did not change anything about his relationship with God, even though it might cost him his life. Was it because he was stubborn? Is there any virtue in Christians being stubborn, wearing our religion on our sleeve and being obstinate? No. I think Daniel did it because he loved God, and he was more interested in the honor of God, his real boss, than the king of Medo-Persia. He wasn't doing it because he was just stubborn. It was about love. And he said, I'm not going to let anything come between my relationship and my time with God. Now, I can't do this without trying to exploit a very simple point. The reason there is a book in the Bible called Daniel, I believe, is seen right here in this verse. He prayed and he read his Bible. How do you know, Pastor Doug, that he read his Bible? It doesn't say that. It says he knelt down and prayed 3 times. Why is he praying towards Jerusalem? Because Daniel read in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 21, Daniel read where Solomon said, may you hear the supplications of your servant and your people Israel when they pray towards this place. Matter of fact, Solomon specifically said, if your people are unfaithful and they're carried off to a foreign land, if they pray towards this place. That starts here with Solomon. Daniel did that. Do you have a devotional life? If you'd like to have the character of Daniel, you might need to have the devotional life of Daniel. And a good time for God is not found, it's made. You've got to just do it. Now, here's where I want to make the connection. There is a big test coming in the last days. There is a big test coming. Some people are preparing all along the way. Some people try to cram for their finals right at the last minute. There are going to be some people who are 11th hour workers that will still make it. But for the most part, it's those who are studying now for the little quizzes that will pass the final. In this big test that is approaching, we're going to make a decision. Do I love the Lord so much I would rather die than disobey him? This is the test that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego passed. There was a law made. They had to decide, am I going to obey the law of God or man? They said, even if it means that I'm going to lose my job in Babylon, even if it means I'm going to lose my life, I would rather burn to death, which can't be pleasant, than to bow down to the graven image. One of the commandments says don't worship images. They said we'd rather die. In Daniel chapter 6, Daniel says, one of the commandments says, thou shalt not have other gods before me, and that would certainly include the king of Medo-Persia. I'm not going to worship him as a god. We're to pray to the Lord. I'm making a decision. I'm going to obey God's commandments instead of the political commandments or the commandments of men. I'd rather die, be torn limb from limb by lions, than disobey God. In the last days, those who live during that time will face the same test. Do you love the Lord so much you would rather say, I'd rather starve, can't buy or sell, be persecuted, lose my job, lose my life, than break one of God's commandments? Like the Sabbath? How important is that one? Well, maybe, I won't really break it. I'm still going to keep it. I'm just going to keep it a different day than the one that God picked. What if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they played the music and everybody bowed down to the statue? I'm assuming you all know this story. What if they had said, we're not going to pray to the statue, but this is a good time to check our sandals and go down and start. No, we're not. We're just, we don't want to create a spectacle. May as well go along. They wouldn't compromise. They were fanatics about little things. Like God said, the seventh day, and that means the seventh day. And we know what day that is. That's the day we're going to keep, even if we're the only ones. Daniel was the only one with his window open, praying towards Jerusalem. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the only ones standing up when everyone else bowed down. Do you love the Lord so much that if everybody in this church was to give up their faith, would you still keep it? Now, back to Daniel chapter 6. We want to return to our story. So we've just finished reading verse 10, where he said, once he knew the writing was signed. There were spies watching him pray. They saw him do it 3 times that day. These men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God, and they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, the thing is true according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. So They answered and said to the king, "That Daniel, who is one of the captives from the tribe of Judah, he does not show regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but he makes his petition 3 times a day." And I would like to have had a snapshot of the king's face when he heard them say, "That Daniel." The king, his mouth probably fell open, his eyes got big. He said, "Oh, when I signed that decree, I forgot about Daniel. 3 times a day he prays to his God." Oh, no. He was set up. He spotted it right then, that he had been played, that there was jealousy. They were trying to get rid of him. Pilate knew that the religious leaders were trying to get rid of Jesus just because of jealousy and envy. And he sought to deliver him. But he couldn't, because they kept after him, threatening that it was going to be rebellion against the laws of Rome, because Jesus was making himself a king, and according to the laws of Rome, if anyone else claimed to be king, they were to be executed. Same kind of thing. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. What time of day did Jesus die? Was it the going down of the sun? And these men approached the king and said, "Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed." They're pulling out the fine print and they're saying, "We realize that you regret that you signed this law, but king, this is the law of the Medes and Persians. And especially now, where we've just taken over the Babylonians, we cannot alter our laws. It does not change. You've written it. You've signed it as a decree. They'll have no respect for you as a king. The whole empire is going to unravel if the king changes his law. No way. The law of the Medes and the Persians could not be changed." Now, here's the question. How firm is the law of God? Does God's law change? In spite of all the examples in the Bible, there are people out there that claim to be Christians that believe that when God spoke the 10 Commandments with his own voice and he wrote them with his own finger in the presence of a whole nation, that he's going to just change it. Or he's going to sweep it aside and say, "Well, we got a new plan now." You know how ludicrous that really is? And yet folks have got these clever arguments they've concocted that we can change the law of God. It doesn't change. So the king did all that he could do, and there was no way out for Daniel. So, reluctantly, the king, verse 16, I'm in Daniel chapter 6, verse 16. The king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and they cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke and said to Daniel, "Your God, who you serve continually, he will deliver you." Now, there's a lot of us that might want to take a pen. I've taken a yellow highlighter in my Bible where it says, "Your God who you serve continually." Is it possible for us to serve God continually and consistently? I think everybody who's a believer serves God a little bit, some of the time, right? But how are we to serve God? We're his servants all the time, continually, consistently. And then the promise is, "Your God, who you serve continually, he will deliver you." Is there a time of trouble and a storm coming? Yeah. If we serve God continually because we love him, will he deliver us? I believe that's a promise we can count on. Then they took a stone and they brought it and they laid it on the mouth of the den. Oh, that sounds familiar. Was there a stone placed over the tomb of Christ? And by the way, that lion's den was the equivalent of a death sentence. And he sealed it. Not only was there a stone placed on the tomb of Christ, but what else was put on the tomb? Government seal. And that seal said King Darius, King Medo-Persia. On Jesus' tomb it said Pontius Pilate, Governor Judea. Seal placed on the stone. Interesting. With his own signet, with the signet of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. This reinforced the miracle. Now the king went to his palace, and he spent the night fasting. And no musicians were brought before him, and his sleep went from him. What do you think the condition was of God in heaven during the time when Christ was in the tomb? Were they playing their harps in heaven? Or was there a great somberness there? Then the king arose very early in the morning. What time of day did Jesus rise? Very early in the morning. And he went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. And the king spoke. The king's heart yearned after Daniel. You know, it said the king set his heart to deliver Daniel. This was his best man. He didn't want to lose him. And he said, Daniel, servant of the living God. Why did he say that? Because he knew that Daniel served the real God, unlike the gods of Medo-Persia. Has your God, who you serve, continually been able to deliver you from the lions? And Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. Also before you, O king, I've done no wrong. Isn't that what Pilate said? I find no fault in Jesus. Then the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury or hurt was found on him whatsoever, because he believed in his God. Daniel was saved by faith. It starts out by saying here in the beginning of chapter 6, verse 4, he was faithful. Daniel was full of faith. Daniel was not saved by works. He had good works, but his works were because of great faith. He was saved from the lion's den by his faith. What does real faith mean? Because he believed in his God. He showed his belief by putting God first. Whoever believes in him will not perish. Do we have the kind of belief where we take our time with God? That's what it means to believe in him. If we say we believe in God, we don't ever give him our time, then we're lying. It's not just saying, oh, I believe he's out there and he exists. The devil says that. It means I believe in him and I'm going to spend time with him every day. That's what it means to live in God. The king was exceedingly glad for him. Jesus came out alive, didn't he? Daniel came out alive. He was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him. They needed no Band-Aids. Not even the smell of smoke was on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When God saves you, he saves you completely. Amen? And some people say, well, lions weren't hungry. No, if you don't think the lions were hungry, keep reading. The king gave command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, their wives. And the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces or ever they came to the bottom of the den. Those lions were very ferocious lions. Now Daniel standing up, not only was it a witness, listen, the king, he sent out a decree that everyone was supposed to pray to the king. That decree is completely forgotten and swallowed up by the next decree. This decree is what the king sends out that the people remember. To all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree in every dominion of my kingdom that men must tremble and fear before King Darius? No, the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom is the one that shall not be destroyed, not Medo-Persia. And his dominion shall endure to the end. And he delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. This is really what God the Father did with Jesus when he was resurrected. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. In the first year of Cyrus's reign, he issued the decree that Jerusalem should be rebuilt. And I'd like to think that Daniel was, as an old man, retired from his responsibilities in Medo-Persia, where he could go back and die in his home country with the knowledge that the temple was going to be rebuilt. That was a real prayer of his heart.
Stay tuned. Pastor Doug will be right back with this week's special free offer.
Can you have disagreements in a home between the mother and the father and still have love? If our love and unity advertises for Christ, our division advertises for the devil. Can you think of a higher example of oneness than the oneness of Jesus and the Father? How do we get that kind of unity? Virtually everyone on the earth, regardless of religion or nationality, recognize that there is some form of battle raging in the world around us between the forces of good and evil. A colossal struggle between light and darkness, truth and error, oppression and freedom, right and wrong, and ultimately life and death.
In the beginning, there was peace. Why did it change?
When the reign of Lucifer comes, we will live the existence we are supposed to live.
In freedom!
God has made a big mistake. God will not be in charge of our lives any longer.
This is a story that involves every single person. The cosmic conflict.
Hello, friends. The story of Daniel in the lion's den has been told for thousands of years. His faith and conviction when tested was a constant throughout his life. A lot of this is because of his strong relationship to prayer. It's noted that Daniel prayed 3 times a day. What a wonderful example for us to copy. Prayer is said to be the key in the hand of faith that unlocks the treasures of heaven. That's why we want to offer you a wonderful little book entitled Teach Us to Pray. This book will encourage you with some practical guidelines on how to strengthen your prayer life. Please call our toll-free number and ask for offer number 717. Or if you prefer, you can visit our website at amazingfacts.org. You can also write us at Amazing Facts. Offer number 717, P.O. Box 1058, Roseville, California, 95678. Well, our time is up for this edition of Amazing Facts Presents. Until we meet again, remember the words of Jesus, whatever things you ask in prayer believing, you shall receive.
This is your last chance to take advantage of this week's special free offer. There is no cost or obligation. Just call the toll-free number on your screen and be sure to note the offer number when you make your request. The preceding was a paid presentation brought to you by Amazing Facts Incorporated.